Live and direct, you're tuned into the Diallo Show, broadcasting straight out of the sanctuary hypocrisy that is the city of Chirac, state of Illinois. Uh, I apologize. Let me know if you're having some issues via um, social media because something's not right here because the whatever. I won't burden you. If you're having issues tuning in, you can catch me at AM 1680 if you're in the city of Chicago on the TuneIn app, iTunes Radio, also the Q4QUE, the number 4.org website, and YouTube Live, Diallo Kenyatta at YouTube. So you got options to tune in live, to call in live, 312-985-7834. You're welcome to call in live. But unfortunately, it does look like I'm having some issues. I got everything from feedback to echoing in my ears. What do you want from me? Good morning. Today is June 20th in the year of your Lord, 2016. We have a lot to deal with, but a real interesting core issue. So I want to jump in with both feet. But as usual, I gotta say something about Trump and these children, and liberal outrage about Trump separating children at the border. Because before we talk, because today's topic, I'll tell you today's topic. It's making Malcolm's, basically revolutionizing black youth. Because I hear a lot of rhetoric about that, but I see little action on it. But it's very curious to me because I watched for 8 years Obama consistently violate civil and human rights of migrants, of sovereign nations, and of U.S. citizens. Obama is the first president to openly, unapologetically, to admittedly assassinate a U.S. citizen without due process. And the first one that I know the government has assassinated U.S. citizens. I think the government assassinated John F. Kennedy. I think that was an internal setup. I think it was coordinated between the FBI, CIA, and organized crime families. I think that Dr. Martin Luther King was murdered. Not only at the hand of the government, but at the demand of the U.S. government. I think Malcolm X was illegally surveyed, and the U.S. government had a direct hand in ordering and facilitating the murder, assassination of Malcolm X. And these are prominent state-sanctioned murders. But one thing about all those murders is this thing called plausible deniability. And that means that the government tries to hide its hand. Everybody knows about that book by Ralph Epperson, The Unseen Hand. There's a lot of nonsense in that book, but it's a very appropriate title when it comes to the government. They talk about the free market and the unseen hand of the government in free market, but they talk less about the unseen hand of the government in murders, assassinations, exiles, detentions, and disrupting anyone who challenges the oppressive status quo. But Obama did it a little different. Obama said, yeah, I'm going to do it, I intend to do it, and I will do it. And Obama is one of the very rare high-ranking government bureaucrats, government officials, who openly murdered a U.S. citizen based on nothing but his political views and unfounded, unconfirmed accusations. And then, a few days later, murdered his 16-year-old son. Now that would be like the government agents, the government allies, the government assets from the Nation of Islam that murdered Malcolm X turn around and then shooting his children who were right there. And even the worst government officials, Nixon, Kennedy, some of the worst Cold Warriors, some of the most openly, overtly racist. I mean, we haven't seen them do that to the Panthers. They murdered Fred Hampton. The government murdered Fred Hampton. Again, they wanted plausible deniability. They claim he had guns. They claim he fired. They would always want plausible deniability or justification for their assassinations. So even when they murdered Fred Hampton, when the government, federal and local agents murdered Fred Hampton, his wife and his unborn son, who was 9 months pregnant with Fred Hampton Jr., they allowed them to live. But Obama took it to a whole nother level. And if you think I'm lying, there's so much documentation, journalists and government documents, and even Obama on record saying, yes, we did this for the interest of America, for America's national security. I unilaterally executed a U.S. citizen without due process, in total violation of the U.S. constitutions and all treaties. I did it. And who want to hear me sing some more Al Green? You'll never find. Or is that Al Rose? I don't know. What's his name? Al Jarreau? I don't know. The old soul, I can admit, I'm not an expert on old soul, but I know Obama would sing y'all pretty songs and y'all just pass out. Who want to see me shoot some jump shots? Who want to see Michelle flex her arms? And y'all would be totally off topic. Easily distracted. You know, who want to see Sasha flip burgers in the Hamptons for the summer? Pretend like we're normal human beings. But look up Anwar al-Awlaki and his 16-year-old son. Look it up. Don't take my word for it. But all of a sudden, these people who did nothing when Obama, to hell with separating families, let's just separate them using micro nukes, bunker busters, drones, predator drones. They separated families in the Obama administration by blowing them apart. And where was the outrage? You had Cole Pink out there. You had Medea Benjamin out there. You had some liberals, some members of the left wing who were calling this out. And those people were locked up, dragged away. Obama oversaw the atrocities and murders of children. Operation Cast Lead in Palestine. Now y'all paying attention to Palestine. Oh, they're shooting Palestinians at the border. Obama, when he was said, what about the atrocities in Palestine? What about the Israeli government's mass murder of people in their own territory? He said, I support Israel's right to exist, and I support Israel's right to defend itself. And by extension, he said, I support Israel's rights to violate human rights and international law. So I wish I could sit back and say, oh, these Democrats, oh, these liberals have turned over a new leaf. They now give a damn about brown babies. They now give a damn. Oh, the day of Democrats bombing brown babies, neglecting brown babies, incarcerating brown babies, those days are over. But some tell me that's not the case. Something tells me that the moment that there's another Democrat in office, that it'll be over. It'll be a wrap. And you all, even you liberals, even you righteous black folks, as soon as there's a shiny, polished Democrat who is articulate, who is warm and fuzzy, who is actually in a nurturing, loving relationship that is media worthy, where they don't have to bury the Democrat's wife and pretend that the wife is having a medical procedure. As soon as there's a non-sexual, exposed sexual predator and potential pedophile like Trump in office, I think y'all go back to sleep. Because not only was it Obama who was killing children, bombing children, exporting children, detaining children, we could jump back one. Let's jump over to Bush administration, because Bush was a monster too. Cheney was a monster too. And many of the Bush people like John Bolton slid right into the Trump administration. Just like Trump, just like Obama hired a lot of Clinton administration. It's just a revolving door. But Bill Clinton was also a baby killer, a baby snatcher. Remember his beloved feminist Secretary of State and his beloved feminist Attorney General? Remember Janet Reno at Waco had burned children in a compound and ran a tank, and they saw the children's clothing caught up in the treads of the tank, ran them over with tanks. Remember Ruby Ridge, when there was a mother breastfeeding the baby, and Janet Reno, the feminist, for-woman, pro-woman, gave permission to federal agents to shoot a mother while she suckled the baby? Talk about separating a mother from child. Where was all the weeping and wailing and moaning and gnashing of teeth when that woman had her brains blown out? And these were white folks. Well, in Waco, it was mostly non-white folks. But the leader was white. But he, just like most of these white cult leaders, that he had as many black folks as he was willing to take, because we love following in behind white cult leaders. We ain't learned that lesson yet. But in Ruby Ridge, them was rednecks. In fact, remember the Timothy McVeigh bombing? That was in retaliation for Ruby Ridge in Waco, Texas, and the Clintons' repression of the so-called militia movement. Where was the weeping and wailing and moaning and teeth for these little babies that died, that were killed, that were separated, that were dehumanized under Clinton and Obama administrations? That's why I don't trust y'all. I wish I could lock arms with all of y'all talking about these Honduran babies. I wish I could sing Kumbaya and get around the campfire and pray for y'all alongside these Costa Rican, these little Mexican and Panamanian babies. But I don't trust y'all. Y'all got selective sympathy and selective memory. And I think, like so many times, if I get out there and lock arms with y'all to sing Kumbaya with y'all, let's save the babies with y'all, by the next election, by the 2020 election cycle, when Bernie steps up again, or what's that lady's name? Trump calls her Elizabeth Warren. When she gets out there and announces her candidacy, I'll be standing out there all by myself again. And all of a sudden, the world will be made right in one election cycle. And the world ain't made right. Y'all just will ignore the hell. Y'all move on to the next cause celeb. Y'all move from Darfur. Remember Darfur, and everybody was weeping and wailing for Darfur? Remember the Congo? Remember the Sierra Leonean blood diamonds? Remember the fallout in Fukushima? Remember the Gulf oil spill? All of these cause celebs, all these causes that had people in the streets, there's still problems. Every single one of those, not one of those problems has been solved. And y'all have moved on. That's not what's hot in the street right now. In my days of protesting, in my days of walking the street, I was an idiot, because I'd come home and march and I'd throw my sign away. That's done. We've made our voices heard on that issue. I could save those things. I should have a file cabinet full of protest signs, because it's the same protests recycled. I might have to edit it just a little. Just 3 to 4 years ago, the Chicago Reader did an entire story on the Cook County Juvenile Detention Center. And they went in there with cameras. I have one of those posters on the wall in my office to remind me of what I'm struggling for and who I'm struggling against. And they had black children sleeping on lice and flea-infested pads on cold concrete floors in cells that were meant for adults. And your little black children brought in because they couldn't sit still in school, because they cursed out a teacher, because they were truant, because they stole a candy bar and healthy children will be taken into these facilities and they develop respiratory diseases and respiratory infection because the air is so foul, skin lesions because the water is foul, digestive issues because they're eating grade D, grade F, but edible food. Front page story for the Chicago Reader, the local weekly, which has some good journal. I ain't trying to do, they don't pay me to advertise, but damn, it's better than the Sun Times, better than the Tribune ever was. Some decent articles, a lot of fluff, but some decent articles when they want to be. Where was the weeping? So y'all care about babies depending on who it hurts politically. But again, Chicago is a Democratic city with a Democratic mayor, a majority Democratic Senate, in a state with a Democratic legislature, and Obama gave his rubber stamp to Rahm Emanuel. Obama sanctioned the local city government. So you can murder, rape, illegally incarcerate, dehumanize children in Chicago because it's Democrats doing it, so it must be for their own good. So call me cynical or whatever other adjectives, whatever other titles, whatever you want to call me, but I just can't trust it. I wish I could. I wish I really gave a damn about these Honduran babies, these Costa Rican babies, these Mexican babies. I wish y'all gave a hot damn about these refugees, but I don't believe you. I don't believe you. If Obama, and remember they released those horrible photos of the immigration detention camps. And they were like, look what Trump's doing. And they found out those photos were from the Obama era, and now the photos have disappeared. No more hashtags, no more viral, no more sensation. And now they finally, it took them a minute, they got some actual photos from the Trump administration. And notice everybody, even some Republicans, the Clintons have made their statement. Every prominent politician, every prominent actor and actress has made their statement denouncing this. Where's Michelle and Barack? They balling. They kicking it. And I think Obama knows. I don't know for sure, but I suspect that Obama's like, if I say something about these babies, that might bring up my record. You know. That's what, you know, if my wife, she likes to buy pillows and little trinkets and knickknacks for the house. But I know if I say something, then she's going to come back at me. I eat too much junk food, spend too much time playing video games, so I have to say, you know, am I ready to do this? Say, why'd you buy them pink Power Puff ink pens with the fluorescent ink? You know, that's just a frivolous purchase. You sitting there playing video games all weekend. Touche. So, you know, sometimes when you're in a relationship, you got to pick your battles. You got to, it's like, what does she have on me before I come at with what I got on her? Sometimes you just say, hey, just say nothing. Let it happen. That's how relationships work. And guess what? The Democrats and the Republican, they're married. They're the left and right wing of an imperialist, white, oppressive, genocidal, omnicidal bird. And you never seen a bird that can't fly with both wings. The Democrats and Republicans have the same objective. They just have a different way of getting to the same goal. So I do think that Obama got enough sense to know that there are people out there like me waiting with the documents, with all the evidence in hand. And the moment he says, Trump shouldn't separate children at the border, we'll smack him in the back of his neck with the list of all the children he violated, of all the immigrant violations, all the times he ignored the Geneva Convention, all the times he dehumanized refugees. We'll come up with the stacks on stacks on stacks of all the people he snatched off the street and send them out of the country. And he used the DREAM Act as cover. Look, this good little cushy little pretty policy I have for immigrants over here. Don't pay attention to what I'm doing over there. And we fell for it. Now, also, and let me tell you, most people, liberal and progressive, black and white, have a very reactionary attitude towards immigration and migration and refugees. I was invited to the Racial Justice in Praxis. Um, what do they call that? Academic, not a convention. I don't. I don't know the formal name. I don't remember the formal name for it. It's right on the tip of my tongue. Conference. I was invited to this academic conference. And I'm like, why they calling me? Because everybody on the list had a PhD. I ain't got no PhD, but they invited me out. So what? Well, I'm gonna say no. So anyway, at that time, this is under the Obama administration. No, was this Obama? Yeah, this is the tail end of the Obama administration, but this is while Trump candidacy was up, and it was just around the time he was saying the rapists and the murderers and the MS-13 were coming. I'm like, man, look, Trump, if you want to see a rapist, a murderer, an illegal invader of this land, go look in the mirror, scumbag. But anyway, I gave a presentation called Trespassing on the Plantation. And I was basically talking about black people's reactionary response to immigration and how we need a revolutionary analysis and a revolutionary approach to immigration in the United States. Because I thought it looked really absurd, black folks in a land that doesn't want them, in a land that oppresses them, in a land that discriminates them, in a land that dehumanizes them, a land that steals their children, a land that locks them up, often without full due process, a land that even with our citizenship doesn't protect us from being treated like immigrants. In fact, immigrants and enemies of the United States many times throughout history have been treated better than black citizens. Just ask the Irish immigrants. Ask all the immigrants that came over on Ellis Island and had more standing with being in this country in 1 hour than black people had standing in being in this country 100 years. So I understand black people's issues with immigration. And we go through our communities and we find Vietnamese who, our sons, took up arms to go fight in Vietnam. The Hmong people, the Koreans, the Arabs, many Palestinians in Detroit, New York City. They come to our communities, open up shops, nail salons, bodegas, and treat us like dirt. Take the money and run. I understand. But we will only perpetuate the problem if we don't have a revolutionary analysis, a radical analysis, and a revolutionary solution. So if you want to get back into this immigration thing from the Pan-African perspective, go check out Trespassing on the Plantation, where black people trying to defend the fences of the plantation, trying to maintain our spot in an oppressive system, trying to elevate within or secure our advantage within a oppressive genocidal system. And also go to Chicago Reader. You want to talk about children, the Juvenile Detention Center, Cook County Juvenile Detention Center expose that was done by the Chicago Reader. And then come back and tell me about how Democrats give a damn about babies on the border. I'll wait. I will wait. And one more thing I just want to touch on before we talk about making Malcolm. I'm seeing a lot on social media, and I don't really give much weight to things I see trending on social media unless I also see them occurring in real life. So if I see something on social media, like a few years ago, that whole groceries thing, ooh, like it's supposed to be. And everybody was talking about eating groceries and who was the anti-groceries, pro-grocery camps, and then the scientific nerds talking about, hepatitis and other, parasitic infections. And I'm like, okay, I stayed out of that debate because it had no real world translation. All that stuff to me was online. Beyond online, it was unreal to me. So I let it stay where I found it. I left it where I found it, online. But sometimes things emerge from the internet, emerge from the computer screen, and they find themselves walking up and down the street where I could touch it, smell it, hear it, see it with my own eyes. And so then I'm like, well, this might be an issue. This might not just be internet huffing and puffing. And that thing is genderizing oppression. And genderizing oppression is the assertion that black men are somehow more burdened by or somehow benefit from the white oppression, or the notion that black women are somehow more burdened by or somehow benefit from white oppression. That there are two distinct and separate forms of oppression and outcomes of oppression for black men and black women. And that our solutions rely on us acting in the interest of our gender as opposed into the interest of our race first. That there is the notion that our oppressors, our exploiters, somehow prioritize or target men over women or women over men. And then we fight with each other, not fight the oppressor, but we fight with each other trying to validate this notion that we suffer more, or that you're the cause, or the architect of my pain, or I'm the architect of your pain. And we beat each other over the head by this gender-based oppression. And I have asked black feminists, and I have asked Afro-sexist, mommy issue militants, can you give me one form of oppression that was imposed against men or women that the men or other men or women was exempt from? Give me a form of oppression that exempted black men but was imposed on black women, or a form of oppression that exempted black women that was imposed on black men. And when I say men and boys, or women and girls, and I never get a straightforward answer, I never get a complete answer. Often they respond by attacking my motives, questioning my own manhood. Seriously, men and women. Oh, would you a simp? These girls, you a punk. What are you? That's what the dudes say. And then the women are like, the feminists will say to me, what kind of man argues with women? You're spending all, I literally had women say to me, why are you talking to women? You should be out there catching serial killers that are killing black women. And I have to say, am I crazy? Or is it the world around me? I don't know. And so, since white people, I think, again, this is more integration. White people have gender wars. And white women and white men go at each other. So we look at them, and what else are we going to do but mimic what they do? We've been doing that since the Emancipation Proclamation. We have been mimicking white folks. No matter how backwards, no matter how degenerate, if there's anything white people are engaged in, you will find a significant population of black people doing it. We got all these black Jehovah's Witnesses, all these black Mormons, black capitalists. Everything you find that white people do, and then we don't even put our own slant on it. We just adopt it wholesale. So black men are trying to be the head of household, because you know, when Eve gave Adam the fruit, the forbidden fruit, God mandated. Remember, he cursed Eve. One of Eve's curses was that she would have great pain in childbirth. What a jerk move. To relate the woman's natural pain in childbirth to a divine curse. What an asshole, whoever wrote that. But the other curse was that she would be subservient to man for eternity. Verbatim. She ate the apple first, and then she seduced Adam into eating the apple. And so black men came off the plantation and said, oh, we lost our religion, our culture, our God, our moral ways. So let's just adopt what's laying around. Let's just do what the man who's kept me in bondage, I'll just do what he does. Seems to work for him. He's got a big plantation house. So if I act just like he did, maybe I'll get a big plantation house. But black men started to act just like white men. And instead of getting a big plantation house, we ended up in the sharecropper shack. And instead of saying, well, damn, I'm here in the sharecropper shack, I'm not in a big plantation house, so acting like the white man didn't do nothing for me, We kept trying to act like the white man. We saw the white man thumping around his big plantation house. We were thumping around little one-room, dirt floor shacks on sharecropper shacks. Big mistake. But I'm saying we imitate what they do. Big mistake. And it ain't really working for him. He's just got really good marketing and propaganda. And when I have more time, maybe tomorrow. No, not tomorrow. Friday. Friday, 7 a.m. Central Time. Maybe I'll talk more about genderizing oppression. And maybe I can finally get a feminist or a minister to tell me. Now, I acknowledge that oppression impacts us differently, that we have different responses, different levels of intensity in certain arenas. But the core of our oppression is not gender specific. That's all I'm saying. Yes, black women die at higher rates of ovarian cancer, and black men die at higher rates of prostate cancer. And so biologically maybe. But maybe y'all could tell me. I'm just saying it seems weird to me. I haven't gotten a good answer. And I'm still waiting. Y'all tell me. Holla at your boy. How does genderized oppression work? And how do gender-specific solutions to oppression work? How are these black women divesting black women? How are black women going to get free, separate, and apart from black men? And what will that look like? You're going to be liberated and you're going to be married to an oppressed man. Or you can marry outside the race, but even then, you could call Serena Williams. I'm sure you got her number and ask her. How's being married to a white man cause you to be treated with less racism? In fact, it intensifies racism sometimes. You get hostility from blacks and hostility from whites. You get the worst of both worlds married outside your race. I guess it's worth it. Love is the ultimate power. I don't know how it works. But I'm willing to hear y'all explain to me this genderized depression. I just asked a man yesterday that was talking about black women getting more attention for their issues and more sympathy for their suffering. I said, how, Sway? Where? Give me examples. And he said, I'm like, I actually don't. So he accused me of having some insidious agenda behind me asking for more evidence. So I'm waiting. And I'd like to know. And the moment I'm wrong, I'll tell you, listen, I guess there is gender-specific oppression and there are gender-specific solutions to this oppression. I'd like to see it. I'd like to hear it. Here we go. Again, tell me. Because I'd like to know. And you can call in. Hell, you can show up here at the studio, pull up at the thing here, pull up at the mic, put on the headphones, and you can tell the people directly. Look at that echo. I'm waiting. Anyway, let's move on. I hope I have enough time to really suss this out. I want to talk about making Malcolms. Because just in this year, I've heard two things that kind of blew my mind. There was the death of two prominent deaths. One just happened, what was it, just yesterday? That XXXTentation. There was a rapper, a controversial rapper, named Triple XXXTentacion, and Stephon Clark. And even though these two deaths are unrelated directly, they have no direct connection, there's one thing that both of these individuals, when they died, they were polarizing. And there were some people that were like, the community should not rally behind them, or they're not worthy of our sympathy because of how they lived their lives. Even though 22 and 20 years old, they both had a history of anti-black views. And these are black young men. That Triple X rapper said that black people need to stop complaining about police brutality. He denied that police brutality was racist or racial specific, and that black people played a race card. He had a long history of abusing black women, or abusing women in general, even attempts at sexual torture and mutilation of women. Pretty serious stuff. I have to tell you, I heard about this guy when he was first time he was released from jail a couple of times ago. Know nothing about his music. I know more about his legal troubles and his petty beefs than I do about his music. And then there's Stephon Clark, the guy who said the only thing he wants black is an Xbox. He had nothing for black women, and he even looked forward to the day where the black genome, where the black phenotype was erased from reality. He had no time for black people's collective struggle, and he had even less time for black women. And they lost their life as a result of the systems and institutions and structures and protocols of the white domination. Stephon Clark being killed by the police, and X-Tenaction was murdered. They don't have details on his homicide, but we understand a black man shot down by an automatic weapon. We don't manufacture the guns in the hood. We don't create the conditions and circumstances for this urban warfare, urban violence. We know that comes from government policy, long-standing regressive and reactionary policing and economic policies, and so on and so forth. We know the story. We understand that anytime, or we need to understand that anytime there's a persistent social ill, there is no persistent social problem that comes from the bottom up. In order to create and sustain a societal problem, you need societal power. So we know that black on black violence, so if you read Dr. Amos Wilson, is a direct result of white on black violence. Black self-annihilation in service to white supremacy. So both of these black male youth, were victims of global white domination, the systems and institutions of global white domination. But they were also enthusiastic anti-black actors, relentlessly, consistently. And so that leads to some black people saying, to hell with them. Their fate is their fate. They're on some Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman carried a pistol, and she was very sympathetic. But she would have to take that pistol and shoot another slave in the gut and leave him behind to bleed out in the swamp. Because this individual was a detriment to the collective. And it wasn't an easy choice, but it was a necessary choice. And then a lot of people turn around and say, he could have been a Malcolm X. When a young person died, every dead young person could have been the next Malcolm X. And so that bothers me when people say that, because it really distorts who and what Malcolm X meant. And it really just ignores the fact that it's just an absurd notion. It's really an absurd contemplation. And my policy is the legacy stands. If you die too soon to have your miraculous transformation, then I'm not going to speculate about your potential miraculous speculation. Your legacy stands. That was my argument with Stephon Clark. His legacy stands. I'm not going to fantasize about what he would have been. I'll just deal with what he actually was. And he's dead now. That's it. That's the end of his chapter, as Nas would say. And what's the point of speculation when we have the capacity to know? I'm all for speculation and theories when there's no ability to know. But when you have the ability, when you have the facts, when you have the evidence, you work with the facts, live with the truth. That's quote Norman Goldman. That's his whole theme. I work with the facts, I live with the truth. He's a trial lawyer. So take that with a grain of salt, but it's a great saying. So I'm not going to speculate about what coulda, woulda, shoulda been. When I know what is. Now I can speculate about us collectively, but when you have the facts on an individual, why not just work with the facts and live with the truth? Anyway, Since we all caught up on this whole every wayward black youth could be a Malcolm, let's have some understanding of what Malcolm was. First thing I have to dispel, and that I really hate, is that the Nation of Islam made Malcolm. That's a myth on every single level. And I know a lot of people love Malcolm, but they don't read Malcolm. They don't listen to Malcolm. Malcolm said the first man that encouraged him to read, the first man he ever saw to command people with his words, the first role model for manhood and black consciousness that Malcolm had since his father was assassinated by the Ku Klux Klan was a man by the name of John Bembry. And it was John Bembry who not only encouraged Malcolm to read, but helped him to read, helped him to increase his vocabulary. He was actually the one who had awakened Malcolm's intellect. And he's not remembered. Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad gets credit. But Elijah Muhammad was building on a foundation that was set by John Bembry. And before John Bembry, remember, Malcolm's parents were Garveyites. Malcolm's parents, his father was assassinated, thrown onto railroad tracks and nearly cut in half because he moved to the South to spread the message of Marcus Messiah Garvey. And then his wife, who was the wife of a crazy nigger, nobody wanted to hire the wife of a crazy nigger, she was put in an insane asylum because she was a Garveyite. And then the children were farmed out to foster care. So Malcolm experienced a childhood of abuse, of loss, abandonment, overt racism, which created in him a hostility, an antisocial outlook, which, led to ultimately to his incarceration, where he met John Bembry, and he learned to channel his justified, his righteous rage in a constructive manner. And it was not actually in prison where Malcolm learned about the nation. His siblings had joined the nation. His disloyal, backstabbing siblings of Malcolm X, who when the nation was harassing and quote unquote creating the climate that led to Malcolm X's death. What the hell does create the climate to lead to somebody else's death? You facilitated the death. You cooperated. You're culpable in the murder of Malcolm X. You didn't, I just created the climate. That's a soft way of saying I was a government agent. So I get paid by the government to bad jacket someone. Look up bad jacketing if you don't know what it means. To be an agent for provocateur. And you just call, well, I just created the climate. What'd you do? I created the climate yesterday when my wife told me to turn on the central air. I don't like playing with these words. So, after his siblings recruited him into the nation, his brother literally said, if you stop eating pork and you accept Allah as the prophet and Muhammad as the final prophet, blah, 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 I'll get you out of jail. And even at that time, there was never a time that I'm aware of where Malcolm X was fully on board with the Nation of Islam program. He was not very good at being a cult follower. Even while he was still in jail, after he had come in and accepted, stop eating pork, accepted that the Prophet Muhammad was Allah's messenger, he was still studying communism. And he first came under FBI surveillance when he literally wrote a detailed letter to the President of the United States. I don't know if the President got the letter. But Malcolm was a wild dude. He literally wrote a letter saying that, I am a communist. Which, communist, if you know anything about communism in Islam, just study the Afghan Russian war. Just look at, I mean, just look. Communism and Islam have been beefing harder than communism and capitalists, than communism and Christianity. In fact, you'll find a lot of flirtation and friendly relationships with communists and many Protestant and Catholic sects. But for some reason, Muslims are like, we're going to cut the throat of communists. We're going to cut the throat of communists. And this has gone way back. Way back. Because Russia borders several Islamic nations. So, Malcolm was identified by the government as, at times they say he was a communist, and at other times they say he was a communist sympathizer. And Malcolm is even on record as professing his embracing or his comprehension of Marxist analysis. So, and that was just the beginning. That's when he was first in, before he even became a minister in Detroit. You know, for what it's worth. You know, this was a doomed relationship from the beginning, I think. As I understand it, as I have observed, as I read Malcolm. And I know what it's like to be a part of an organization that you've got issues with. For years, I was a member of the Black United Front. First real black organization where I learned about organization hierarchy. And one thing I learned from that organization, and I learned from Kwame Ture, was organizational discipline. Which means when you're in an organization, just because something happened you don't like, you don't pack up your ball and go. You got to stay through the thick and the thin, the good times and the bad times. You got to stay on mission. You got to honor your commitment and your obligation to not only the organization, but the other people that you work with. And one of my biggest issues with the National Black United Front was their 2008 decision to endorse Barack Obama and to even offer up MBUF members and MBUF associates and MBUF infrastructure to the campaign to get Obama elected. And this wasn't for the election, but this was more so for the primary. And I owned a small vegan restaurant, and a lot of that organizing for the National Black United Front's assistance, and they sent two brothers, one brother in the leadership, came to talk to me. And they're like, you need to chill with all this anti-Obama nonsense. And we talked to, my wife can tell you, I got home maybe 4 a.m. We talked all through the night. And they heard me out. They heard all of my issues. They heard all of my political predictions, many of which came true. Not all of them, fortunately, but many of them came true. But they were like, you got to toe the line. This is the organizational stance. You are an organizational member. And, you know, this is a democratic, collective, communal organization. We laying down the hammer. We're going with the Obama camp. And I'm like, damn. Very well then. Give me a damn bumper sticker. Whatever. And I told the party line, because that's organizational discipline. But I said, I will always be very clear when I'm speaking on behalf of MBUF versus speaking on behalf of myself. But I will not try to undermine the organization's position. And that happened another time. It was the 25th anniversary of MBUF. And they held the anniversary moves around the city, around the country, the different MBUF chapters. But the Kansas City chapter was hosting the MBUF. MBUF was their annual convention. And I was giving a talk. And my talk was on holistic health, vegan diet, and preventing and curing chronic disease through holistic health and proper diet and exercise. I was talking nothing, hugging trees and eating herbs. That was the nature of my speech. But it just so happened that same year, on the 25th anniversary, it was like 10 years, more than 10 years ago, Farrakhan was the keynote speaker. And it just so happened that they had scheduled my talks. I had 2 talks. My first talk was scheduled just before Farrakhan was to go on stage. And so I knew folks wanted to see Farrakhan. They were killing time before going to hear the minister get down. And so they say, oh, it's almost time for the minister. And I'm like, good. I wrapped up my lecture. I had some pamphlets and some brochures on vegan diet, holistic health, and blood pressure, and all the literature I brought. And I think my wife had made some vegan hors d'oeuvres so they could sample some vegan food to see that it's not what they think it is. It's really delicious. And I'm like, all right, y'all, enjoy. But anything, ethno-religious organizations, theocratic leadership, and specifically with God. I just told it. But I made it very clear, trying to exercise organizational discipline, which is very important to me. I pride myself that when I work with a collective in the community, I honor the protocols. I honor my commitment and obligations. If I ain't got nothing else, even if we fail, I feel like I succeeded if I held to my end. And I wish we had more of that in our community and within black organizations. But the next day, it was a 2-day thing. I was given a 2-part lecture. One, I talked about health. The other one, I talked about environmental factors, toxins in our environments and things of that nature. The second time I lectured, there's some guys there, some rough-looking dudes there, like tuned up, standing in the back. You know. But anyway, let me get back to the topic. I'm just saying, organizational discipline. I kind of understand Malcolm. Malcolm had always talked about his obligation to Elijah Muhammad, his appreciation of Elijah Muhammad, and he was always, and it sounds like he was trying to convince himself more than whoever he was talking to. The Honorable Muslim Elijah, he even said it. He's like, for years, I used to always start every sentence, well, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us. But if you read Malcolm, if you listen to Malcolm X lectures, he had far surpassed the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad long before he exited the organization. He was talking about things where Elijah Muhammad's program is essentially live a good life and God will return to save us. When it all boils down, you read Message to the Black Man in America, Downfall of America. Basically, all we have to do is live pious, righteous life and God will do the rest. It's a salvationist organization. Malcolm X is the one who turned it into a nationalist organization and then tried to evolve into a Pan-Africanist organization. And Malcolm was on the outs long before he was, they were looking for a way to get Malcolm out long before Malcolm actually ran afoul. Look at the history. Go back and look at this with fresh eyes. But Malcolm did say, when he heard the statement, the white man is a devil, the white man is not a devil, but the white man is the devil, it awakened something. It really allowed things to fall in place for him. Because he said every single interaction he had with white people, from when they murdered his father, from when they institutionalized his mother, from when they snatched up him and his siblings and put them into boarding schools and orphanages and abusive foster homes, from every white teacher, every white cop, every white union man, every white woman, every white person he had any level of interaction with him had treated him in a way that was inhumane, unjust, unnecessarily hostile. And he was giving back to the world what he felt the world had given him, because he didn't have an analysis of the systems and institutions of white domination. He didn't have an academic way of processing this. He only had an emotional reaction instead of an intellectual response, which a lot of us go through, which a lot of times when we see somebody like Stephon Clark or X-Tenation, we think, yeah, that's some Malcolm elements. No, that's Malcolm Little, not Malcolm X. That's not Omar. Remember, Malcolm, he was first Malcolm X. And then when he went to on his Hajj, he became El Hajj Malik Shabazz. But then this is something we overlook. When he reached the shores of Africa, when he started developing his Pan-African agenda, they changed his name to Omar Wali. Look it up. Malcolm X died Omar Wali. So Malcolm X was like, wait, Islamic name. Malcolm X was, man, that's why they knew he was a threat, all right. And it wasn't, remember, Malcolm X was not a threat when he was walking around talking about Allah will bring retribution on America. The white man is the devil. The white man shrugged. But when he was like, oh, I'm going to have secular organization that has political, economic, and cultural ties when he met with Kwame Nkrumah. Then they were like, whoa, wait a minute there. Now you're a threat, because all that empty rhetoric about gods and devils don't mean nothing to nobody, because gods and devils are not real, people. So you can call a white man a devil all day long and still live a life of wealth and abundance. Just ask the minister himself. So Malcolm X, evolving above and beyond his teacher, which any teacher that's not a megalomaniac would appreciate. I have some young people that I've mentored. And if they surpass me, to me, that is a compliment to my skills. I'm not going to feel threatened. I'm not going to try to isolate them. In fact, I'll push them out above me. But when you're a demagogue, when you're in a precarious position, when you ain't real with yours, when your pupils start to surpass you, you get jealous. You want to subvert them. You get jealous. And then you let other people get in your ear. He think he the man. He think he's the one. You. And for the longest time, I'd like to dispel that the nation did not make Malcolm. The nation provided Malcolm with a platform. And to quickly snatch that platform away. I mean, he was only with the nation, what, about 8 years? That's a presidential term. That's not a long time. But I want to play this for y'all. Anytime anybody want to talk about making Malcolm, where they still promote that lie where the Nation of Islam made Malcolm. Listen to this for a second, and then I'll come back.
What have you got to say about it? Did you teach Malcolm?
Did you teach
Did
Malcolm?
you make Malcolm?
Did you make Malcolm?
Did you clean up Malcolm? Did you put Malcolm out before the world? Was Malcolm your traitor or was he out? And if we dealt with him like a nation deals with a traitor, what the hell business is it of yours?
Did you teach Malcolm? Did you make Malcolm? Did you clean up Malcolm? Now, if you go and look at the timeline of the Nation of Islam, there is no one who constructed, expanded, and recruited more people to the Nation of Islam than Malcolm X. In fact, the Nation of Islam has contracted under Farrakhan's leadership. It has lost, not only has it lost, had to shut down several mosques and lost a great amount of leadership, they have also greatly deviated from the path. What Muslims want and what Muslims believe. I used to be a loyal purchaser of the Final Call newspaper. And in every single issue was in there. What Muslims want, what Muslims believe. And through his affiliation with the Unification Church under Sun Myung Moon and Scientology, you tell me, who's done more to build up versus tear down the nation and its credibility? But I ain't never been a member. When I went for membership, I was rejected. I was told I wasn't ready. They literally locked me out, you know. And I was just a kid trying to be my own, trying to get my Malcolm on. But anyway, and I don't resent that. Really, I don't. Malcolm X built the nation. Malcolm X expanded the nation. The Malcolm X made the nation a household word. Now, some people said Elijah Muhammad wanted to fly under the radar, but other people argue that Elijah Muhammad was enjoying the newfound credibility. Because after Malcolm X, they had Elijah Muhammad was meeting with dignitaries. Malcolm X was able to meet with was considered a major civil rights figure due to the work of Malcolm X. So he was meeting with people, international dignitaries, international religious leaders, national leaders like Martin Luther King, all came to break bread with Elijah Muhammad because of the pedestal that Malcolm X built for him and allowed him to ascend to. And how was Malcolm X repaid? We all know. He was deemed a traitor for trying to hold to the very teachings that the people who betrayed him taught him. Malcolm X actually rejected the nation in 1961, but it wasn't until 1964 that he officially broke tide and started to telling it. But he was so it wasn't even a full 8 years So how are you going to take a man almost 40 and say, oh, we made him? No, Malcolm, John Bembury. And it was the times, the conditions. The revolution was in the air. So no individual can take credit for Malcolm. The community made Malcolm. The community makes the man. Garvey made Malcolm. John Bembury made Malcolm. Elijah Muhammad made Malcolm. It was a multitask. It takes a village. The village made Malcolm. And it's really obscene. And by the time you unmake what you claim to make, you need to stop bragging about what you made. If I make a piece of pottery and I smash it to smithereens for no good reason, I can't brag about what the legacy stands. And it wasn't until 93, 94, when the X movie came out and everybody was wearing X caps and the Malcolm X returned to the bestseller list. The Malcolm has been resurrected by the so-called hip-hop generation, that the NOI softened its rhetoric and reversed its rhetoric on Malcolm. Where they were trying to deny and distance themselves from Malcolm, they then turned around and embraced Malcolm and took credit for Malcolm. Shameful to me. So yes, if you want to talk about Stephon Clark's potential to be Malcolm or X-Tation. Now, I don't see much potential for X-Tation to be Malcolm, because Malcolm never had millions of dollars. I mean, when this young man was shot, he was driving a $200,000, custom coupe. And he was already building a multi-level mansion in some rich Florida suburb. He was already setting up a tour of Paris. So I don't know. I haven't seen any wealthy rappers commit class suicide. They usually embrace the status quo. They don't challenge and fight against the status quo like Malcolm did. But Stephon Clark, he was a hood cat. But again, Malcolm X, I don't know. I just don't see it. And I don't need to pretend to see it. I don't know why. But it seems that there are a lot of people in our community that are invested, that are interested in making Malcolms, and having our wayward youth in the potential for our wayward youth to become Malcolms. But here's what perplexed me. Number one, how are you out here talking about X-Nation could have been a Malcolm? Stephon Clark could have been a Malcolm. Why are you even saying that you're not a freaking Malcolm? What about your potential to be Malcolm? And y'all keep talking about, well, Malcolm X was on drugs. Malcolm X pimped women. Malcolm X was a drug dealer. Malcolm X was the scum of the earth. And look what he was able to accomplish. So whenever I see a drug dealing, scumbag, woman-hating, black, self-hating black man, I see Malcolm. No, you see Detroit Red. You see Satan. That was his nickname. You see Malcolm Little. You're not looking at Malcolm X. You're not looking at El-Haj Malik Shabazz. You're not looking at Omar Wali. So I would say to you, first of all, before you put Malcolm on anybody, why don't you put Malcolm on yourself? What characteristics of the Pan-African militant revolutionary, a man who had an unbreakable love for his people and a superhuman ability for transformation and growth, where's your Malcolm? Where's your inner Malcolm? How the hell you sitting online, texting and tweeting and talking about X-Nation could have been a Malcolm, or we can't have a critical view of X-Nation because Malcolm was a flawed individual? How are you going to tell us we should have been marching for Stephon Clark, justice for Stephon Clark, because Malcolm was self-hating, Malcolm was self-rejecting, Malcolm was antisocial? How are you going to say that? Before you put Malcolm on Stephon Clark and X-Nation, where's your inner Malcolm? Why aren't you being the Malcolm? So at least you don't tell these wayward black youth, here's a role model. You don't have to look in the history books or look at a documentary or look at a Spike Lee movie to get a role model. Look at me. Because I not only could have been a Malcolm, I am a Malcolm. First of all, that's my first question. Why the hell ain't you being a Malcolm? Why aren't you fighting for the dignity, liberation, empowerment of your people using all means necessary? Why ain't you a Malcolm? I don't understand that. I don't go and tell people to be things that I'm not. If I'm out here saying black youth have the potential to be vegan, or black youth should be vegan, then damn best well know I'm being a vegan. Now, I don't tell black youth take up arms and fight the government, because that's not where I am. He could have been an armed insurgent. He could have been, but I'm not encouraging that because that's not what I'm on. That's not where I am. That's not the stage of, or level of struggle that I am. So I only would impress upon people what I am currently doing. So if you ain't Malcolm, shut up about anybody else's potential to be Malcolm, or how they live the life of Malcolm if you ain't living a Malcolm. Worry about yourself. Focus on yourself first. Shoot, and then you wouldn't have to say Stephon Clark, ex-Tenation, could have been like Malcolm. You said they could be like me. They could have got down like I did. I grew up poor. I grew up exposed to the same propaganda system to teach me to hate myself as they did. But I learned to love myself. I endured and came out better and stronger fighting for my people. So Nation, don't criticize him because he could have been a me. No, you got to say he could have been a Malcolm because you ain't shit. Keep Malcolm out of it. I don't understand it. Explain it to me. I'm not saying maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing something because, I mean, there's so much going on in the world that is completely divergent from what I want and from what I understand. Maybe it's me. I'm willing to entertain the thought that it's me. I'm willing to. But you got to I was born and raised in Missouri. And Missouri is nickname is the show me state. You got to show me. You show me. Some dude, we were just arguing about Jay-Z being the greatest MC. And some dude accused me and said that Jay-Z has done more for black people than any conscious rapper, Jay-Z. And I said, wow, that's interesting assertion. I said, please tell me specifically what Jay-Z has done that the black masses should hold him in such high esteem. Give me the specific things that Jay-Z has done. Oh, I'm not going to tell you because all you want to do is tear it down. And so he, again, questioning my question instead of answering my question. And maybe Jay-Z has done some things I don't know about. Now, he told me about some charity that Jay-Z did, and I could tell him about the charity that Hitler did. I could tell him, I mean, hell, Trump had a charity. And I told him about how charity is counter-revolutionary and the not-for-profit industrial complex don't get sucked up into that. And I told him about to go read Claude Anderson, Dr. Claude Anderson, the author of Powernomics and Black Labor, White Wealth, when he talked about charity and when he approached these black athletes and high-end black entertainers 20 years ago and said, I have an economic plan to liberate America and it costs just a fraction of the money you spend on jet planes, just a fraction of the money you give to B'nai B'rith and these other European or white-run charities. For a fraction of the money, I can get you a better return on your investment in your people. And they all told him to go to hell, every single one of them. And then he had to, because no black individual with wealth wanted to help him to truly liberate black people, because charity has never been about liberation. That's why the worst tyrants in the world are willing to give to charities. The Saudi Arabian monarchy give millions and billions of dollars to charity because it doesn't threaten them. They're not going to give money to empowerment. So I said, you showing me stuff, charity stuff that they was done. I can show you horrible people that give to charity. Do you love and honor those people too? You want the black community to love and honor the Trump cabal? Because the Trump runs a charity. The Clinton Foundation is a charity. The Clintons run charities. So if giving to or running a charity makes you worthy of honor from the black community, what specifically are those charities doing? I can show you charities that do more for so anyway, he concluded that, oh, you don't want to learn. I do want to learn. And I'm willing to learn. But I don't want to be BS'd. So anyway, how do we make Malcolms? Since everybody seems to be so interested in making Malcolm, I don't believe that's sincere. I just think people want to give shelter, want to create a reservoir for BS. So, how was Malcolm truly made? It wasn't Elijah Muhammad. We gotta, please know that. Please do not allow that tragedy of a myth to go on that Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X was this horrible person living in darkness until Elijah Muhammad brought him into the light. When Elijah Muhammad found Malcolm, he found an intellectual. He found an awakened man. And if you ask me, but this is my opinion, he obstructed and delayed Malcolm's true growth. But that's my opinion. Because I think if Malcolm hadn't gotten caught up into this mythological stuff of Yaqub and all that, and he had remained on the purely academic path, but Malcolm X was tutored by Dr. John Henry Clark. John Henry Clark always John Henry Clark said that Malcolm used to call him swine eater. And they used to meet in Harlem cafes. And he's like, hey, swine eater. And Dr. Clark would give him books, would give him academic journals and articles, and Malcolm X would read them so fast, it would leave Dr. Clark scrambling to find new material for Malcolm. None of that was sanctioned by the Nation of Islam. All of your Nation of Islam reading is published and given to you by Nation of Islam, and they don't encourage you to look beyond that. Because the moment you look beyond that, you become almost unworthy. And you don't believe me? Then look at what happened to Dr. Khalid Muhammad, who also started to evolve into a Pan-Africanist. Every single time they get a great mind, a truly great mind that just doesn't follow and fall in line, look what happens to it. They try to prevent the independent thinkers from getting in the organization, but when one slips through and they start to manifest, they oust them, isolate them, demonize them. And there's a whole history of this. Get mad at me if you want to, but I ain't the one doing it. I'm just the one telling you about it. And you can go confirm this. You can go listen to the recordings from the later recordings of Khalid Muhammad. And there's another brother, Muhammad, that's still alive, and he works out of Harlem. And Omawali, Malcolm X. How you got these men you claim you respect, who claim are great, but then they tell the truth about everything except the nation. They lie on the nation, but they told the truth about everything else. But anyway, let's go ahead and run with this lie y'all telling, that y'all want to create Malcolms. That y'all wanted, if Stephon Clark was here, y'all would want him to be a Malcolm. Or if X the Nation had not lost his life prematurely and tragically. I don't want I want all black folks to live and reach their full potential. Let me just say that. But I am realistic, and I'm an adult, so I understand that won't be the case for most of us. But many of us live to 80 and don't reach our full potential, and that's another thing. If Elijah made Malcolm, it's like, remember when Dame Dash said he made Jay-Z? And Jay-Z said, if you make me, make another one. So that's what I would say. This is the nation way. We made Malcolm. We cleaned up Malcolm. Make another one. Malcolm was made by the people, and the people alone. Well, first of all, if we want to make Malcolms, if we want to take wayward black youth, if we want to take X the Nations and Stephon Clarks and truly awaken their potential, truly redirect them, instead of just talk about it after they're dead, but actually do something, because guess what? There are still millions of wayward black young girls and women. So we got a lot of women, even though y'all act like X the Nation and Stephon Clark were the only potential Malcolms. But we got a bunch of potential Dr. Betty Shabazz, and we got a lot of potential Malcolm X Omawalis. So you don't have to throw your hands up. Oh, we lost X the Nation, so give it up. You go back to go to work, go back to consuming and working and sleeping. Nope. Guess what? Since you want everybody to tell that lie, oh, you can't judge him. Look, just like Malcolm X. How do you know he wouldn't have? We don't know, but I know for a fact there are some people out there with that potential that you speak of. First thing you're going to need is a functional, independent black organization with infrastructure, with operational budgets, You're going to have to give up your time, your talent, and resources outside of your job, outside of your personal ambitions, and take on responsibility for the collective. And you're going to have to create spaces for the people. You're going to have to create protocols for the people. You're going to have to develop the capacity to reward people who hold to the unity, and you're going to have to develop capacity to sanction those who violate the unity. That's hard work. It's thankless work. It's very unpleasant work. It's unseen work. It's the kind of work where you spend hours and work your fingers to the bone doing, and you'll have some asshole on the internet talk about you ain't doing nothing for the people. Because the only thing they recognize is when Fox News cameras and CBS News camera, or when the internet's going viral and all that kind of stuff. That's what they imagine to be work. So many of the people who actually do work, I see on myself. I see people that I know throughout the country that are doing real work for the people. And I see them being attacked by some ass on the internet talking about, what are you doing? How dare you crush the Farrakhan? What are you doing? How dare you criticize Stephon Clark? What are you doing for the people? And I know myself. And I even tell people, stop giving your resume to these idiots, because I have been asked 1,000 times on the internet, what are you doing for the people? And out of that 1,000 times, maybe 5 to 8 times, the people were inquiring about my actions with the intent of contributing to or assisting my actions or joining my actions. All the other times, it's a dismissive question. So you are going to have to build your own quote-unquote Nation of Islam, or even better, you're going to have to build your own Organization of Afro-American Unity. You are going to have to either join or contribute to or build from the ground up your own African institutions and structures and organizations. Because going to a black youth who's under systemic oppression, you as an individual can do very little for them. You can give them charity. You can buy them book bags and put school supplies in the book bags. You know, you can campaign for them to get hot lunches, but those don't make Malcolms. You need to demonstrate to them to those young people who are suffering from systemic oppression, who are developing wayward tendencies and antisocial behaviors and attitudes, you have to demonstrate to them that there's enough love within their community to build a structure, but they will have a sanctuary from the madness that is their lives, where they can come and do positive, productive work, where they can come actualize their potential. You have to stop encouraging them to get into Harvard, to get into Yale, to get into community college, to get their diploma, because that's the only salvation, is making yourself a marketable commodity, a human resource for white corporations or the white bureaucracy. You can't make Malcolms that way. We have to be in a position to employ our youth, give them a living wage as they do work on behalf of the people. That's hard, unpleasant work. If you really want to make a Malcolm, instead of just stand back and expect somebody, a young person. Malcolm did not become Malcolm on his own. We have to have bookstores. We have to cultivate intellectual culture. We have to cultivate and value intellectualism. We have to show our young people that our conscious revolutionary Pan-African scholars mean as much to us as our damn basketball players and these goddamn rappers, degenerate rappers. Or at least, let's bring the conscious rappers, the progressive rappers, the humane rappers up to the same level as the degenerate rappers and drill rappers. I'm sick of going to see when Public Enemy, Wise Intelligent, when Dead Prez come to town, it's either they're rapping to a damn near empty auditorium or it's 90% white folks in there. So we need to say, hey, if there's a progressive artist coming to town or the next town over, I'm going to take it on myself to make sure I get 12, 24, 100 black youth into there and get them backstage. Instead of just tearing down their music, you can show them the viable alternative. And they got young, Add To, Skip Coon, they got 20-something millennial conscious rappers. J. Cole, I hear he's conscious. I couldn't tell you yay or nay, but that's what I heard. That's the word on the street. We could do this. if you want to make a Malcolm. You also have to make global connections. You can't make black youth feel isolated. That if you can't get it in America, it can't be got. That you're only American. That you're a little tiny 13% minority. You got to show them you're part of a global movement, a multi-generational global movement in reality. You got to give them a historical orientation and foundation. You got to put their suffering into the proper global historical context. We got to just, oh, they just do us this way because we're black. No, it's much more complex than that. It goes much deeper than just because you're black. In fact, they do it because they're white, not because you're black. So even that basic, you can't even do basic right. Can't even do wrong right. So we need physical structures, organizational, ideological, and intellectual culture and development and protocols. We need global connections, international bonds and ties. We should be coming up with the resources. Where Nas is rapping, I'll open every cell in Attica, send them to Africa. Has he done it? And I know LeBron James is sending black kids off to white institutions. Yay! Thank you, LeBron James. I mean, when you got money, shoot, let the Pell Grant do that. Let FAFSA do that. You got money, do something other than what the government's already been doing. Hell, Cosby did that. Why not get these black children passports and say, you are going to be our Caribbean faction, you're going to be our Ghanaian faction, you're going to be the Senegalese faction, you're going to be the Brixton faction, and send young black people and have our own independent black Peace Corps, and send black people to organizations all over the world to learn the language, the culture, the movement, the plight, and how we can assist them and how they can assist us. And then bring some Africans here on our dime. Because we got all these Africans coming here from far away as Sudan. And they get an orientation. And the first thing they told them to do is stay away from niggas. Stay away from black Americans. They're lazy. They're criminals. They're this. They're that. I had a Senegalese refugee that I hired to work as a waitress at my restaurant. And everything she knew about black people from that moment up came from white folks. And in her own mind, it was the white people that facilitated her getting here. Because now we got black people walking around that are anti-immigration, that are praising Trump's immigration policy. Not recognizing that when Trump's ban, half the damn countries on Trump's ban or what was that called? The do not allow admit list. Half of them damn countries were African countries. You think it's only Arabs and Mexicans that they're expelling? And don't you know that there's more black people in Latin America, mainly Brazil, than there are black people in the United States? So when you're talking about banning immigration, you're talking about giving the government your permission, your endorsement to commit atrocity against other black people? But I guess you Yvette followers think, hey, well, I'm unique. Whatever the government's doing to black folks overseas, I'm exempt from. Dumbass. What they do to our brothers and sisters overseas will eventually fall upon us. Every single time it has happened, without exception. So if you ain't got enough humanity, enough decency to support it because it's the right thing to do it for your own selfish interest. Because what do you think they're going to do once they kill off or export and build a wall and get rid of all the damn immigrants? What do you think? They're going to just tell these ISIS guys to pack up and go home, get on the unemployment line? No, they're going to be policing our communities using the same tactics. They're going to be snatching our babies, putting them in the same facilities they just kicked the immigrants out of. Don't you all remember that poem? They came for the Jews, and I didn't say nothing because I wasn't a Jew. They came for the communists. I didn't say nothing because I wasn't a communist. They came for the Catholics. I didn't say nothing because I wasn't a Catholic. They came for the gays. I didn't say nothing because I was a gays. And then when they came for me, there was nobody left to speak up. That's a white poem. We're white people figuring it out. And we ain't the last people they coming for. In fact, they experiment on our communities how best to engage in repression of other people. They down there employing tactics they used against us. And you can't build on that solidarity, on that understanding? They took my job. So if we want to create Malcolms, we have to create the atmosphere for Malcolms. We have to create the fertile soil for Malcolms. We have to make revolution more attractive than crime. We have to make black liberation more attractive than consuming products. We have to make it more viable. We have to be able to say we can provide you with protection, security, identity, standing, more so than the gangs, more so than the streets, more so than Harvard or Yale. But that requires us to do a lot of damn work. And most of our plan is we try to cultivate and help black youth to improve by encouraging them to go to white institutions. You work hard, get your diploma, and you can get to college. You get your diploma, and you could go work for AT&T, work for IBM. You could be president one day. Everything I hear about people talking about how to better black youth involves turning them over to our enemies and hoping our enemies does right by them. And then when we do, Puff Daddy, Baby from Cash Money Records, when we do set up our businesses, we run our businesses just like white folks. Before it was the Jewish record executive. Remember that trope? The Jewish records and the Jewish media companies and the white-owned media companies. They dirty, they cheat. Now, we got a whole generation of artists that have been screwed over by black label executives. You know, got the same horror stories as Otis Redding, Sam Cooke, Michael Jackson, all them. Remember the Italian mafia guys in the media, in the movie and record industry, being strong-armed by the muscle guys and swindled by the Jews. Remember that? That was the line. Oh, they're gonna cheat you. They're gonna steal your stuff. And now, young black artists today can barely relate to that because it's not some mafioso or some white guy doing them in. It's another black established artist. P. Diddy, Master P. Well, I've heard Master P actually did right by his artist. I mean, there are some complaints, but I mean, his reputation is not as sullied as many of these other label heads. So I don't even support the whole black businesses. No, not black businesses. There's nothing inherently better about black businesses than white businesses. You tell me. You tell me. Do you think the women working in the Sri Lankan sweatshop making Ivy Park, Beyonce's fashion is better off than the youth in the sweatshop making Gap? Do you think that the young Maquiladora sweatshop worker in Mexico is better off gluing together Jordans than they are gluing together Skechers? But again, I could be wrong. Show me where black capitalism has done better for us than white capitalism. But some of y'all, maybe y'all just so pro-black that y'all like, hey, I prefer a black tyrant over a white tyrant. And to you, that's enough. My pro-blackness is not that deep. I don't want just painting a bad situation black does nothing for me. So you can't at the same time talk about how a black youth has the potential to go from being antisocial criminal to being a Malcolm X, to have that transformation, and you don't create any of the conditions that Malcolm X had. Malcolm X had revolutionary origins with parents who were Garveyites. Malcolm X had a revolutionary atmosphere. He had an organization to go into, and there was revolution in the air. Malcolm X sat across from African revolutionary, from African Pan-Africans. Malcolm X met with some of our greatest scholars. Dr. Ben, Professor Clark, Arthur Schomburg, again, John Henry Jackson, who he was a personal friends with, and his student. Where are the scholars? Where are you going to send them to Dr. Umar and his empty, baseless, anti-academic, cultish, demagogic rhetoric? Where are our real scholars? It's a shame. We've lost some of the greatest scholars of the last century, and we haven't properly reproduced them. We haven't cultivated. Oh, well, we do have some. We got Jared Ball. And we got some black scholars still here. Hell, I'm married to one. So we do have revolutionary scholars. But what bridges are we taking? And the scholars too. I mean, in the this month and last month, I accepted invitations to go talk to high schoolers. And that's really not my forte. You know, I'm just not one of those, you know, Mr. Roberts type, even though I do be rocking the little sweaters. But I talk to youth. I just decided I don't have to have an issue with talking to young people. I just talk to them exactly like I talk to adults. Because I work with young people. Like when it comes to send some youth over to the garden, I could work with youth in the garden doing grunt work all day. But then trying to talk academically with them, I just talk to them like I talk to an adult. I make no distinction as far as their age. Same issues, same vocabulary. But you got to make an effort and a commitment to go to young people. And create incentives for them to come to you as well. You ain't just got to chase in behind them. So you got to have ongoing academic cultivation. You have to create revolution in the community. How are you? There's so many black people that walk around talking about the youth, the youth, the youth. I don't believe that you can work with the youth if you can't cooperate with your peers. How are you going to reach back a generation when you can't look across right next to you and create bonds? And the youth see that. You don't have anything happening with your peers, your age group. You're not cooperating. You ain't built nothing with your own peers, but you're going to reach back to their generation and tell them what they should or shouldn't do. How that look? So if you in your 40s and you ain't got no other 40-year-old allies and you ain't built nothing with other 40-year-olds, leave the damn youth alone. They can do that all by themselves without your input. If you're in your 50s and 60s and you ain't got no, and the main thing I always say we're supposed to give the youth is wisdom and resources. And usually you got to have the resources available before they're even open to the wisdom. But we go to our young people totally empty-handed with words. So don't tell me about the next black youth that could have been a Malcolm if you ain't already a Malcolm and you ain't really to create the conditions that created Malcolm. You ain't really ready to reproduce. You want them to create Malcolm with none of the Malcolm tools, with none of the Malcolm history, with none of the Malcolm resources. Stop lying. Just leave Malcolm out of it. We should revolutionize our youth, but the only way to create revolutionary youth is for the adults to be revolutionized and for the community and the culture to be revolutionized. Dr. Claude Anderson said this inspiration stuff is a joke. It's a hustle. He said, I can inspire you to go to the moon. I can go into a school and set up this wonderful projector and show the planets and the stars, and I can tell them all about the new technology and how the space travel is being privatized and the wonderful opportunities, and that the richest man in the world, Jeff Bezos, says he's going to start to finance research into space exploration, and how the United States has a probe on Mars and they want to build a moon base. I can inspire black kids to want to be into space. But if I ain't got no damn rocket, if I ain't giving them no rocket fuel, if I don't have the research in the laboratories in order to get to that, I'm running a hustle on these kids. I'm either lying to them, or I want to turn them over to the Chinese government, or I want to turn them over to the white government to go into space. And guess what? If you go into the space riding on the back of white folks, guess what's going to happen at the space station? It's going to be racial hierarchy at the space station. What happens when we get to Mars? It's going to be a racial hierarchy when we get to Mars. So if you can't make it here, what makes you think you're going to make it on Mars? You think you're going to fly off and leave racism behind? And we got enough black billionaires, enough African billionaires to start an African space station, African colliders, African whatever else you want on Africa by, for, and of African people. But we'd rather buy things that white people make instead of making things ourselves and creating the infrastructure to manufacture things ourselves. Same thing here in the United States. LeBron James, instead of paying black kids to go off to white academic institutions, why doesn't he fund? We have existing African educational institutions that all operate on a shoestring. We don't want to create Malcolms. We just want to talk rhetoric about Malcolm. We don't really want to understand Malcolm. We don't really respect Malcolm. We just find that he's a convenient scapegoat for whenever somebody's a criminal and we want to pretend like the criminal was going to be anything other than a criminal. Guess what? The vast majority of criminals stay criminals. The vast majority of scumbag children grow to be scumbag adults. And we never say that about adults. Why not? Clarence Thomas could have been a Thurgood Marshall. No, he couldn't have been. Clarence Thomas is Clarence Thomas. And this isn't even an age thing at this point. How many people did Malcolm X go to prison with? We literally had millions of prisoners all over the United States from then till now. And yes, we get a George Jackson, we get a Malcolm X, but the vast majority of them come out worse than they went in. Come out being better criminals than they were when they went in. And that doesn't have to be the case. Remember when Mandela was incarcerated? When they were locking people up, they used to call the prisons Mandela University. Because when Mandela was first incarcerated, he started revolutionizing all the other prisoners. Of course, that's when they started their work on him. And that's a whole nother thing, talking about the evolution of Malcolm X. We also need to study and research the devolution and regression of Mandela, who went from being an armed insurgent, who went from being an African revolutionary, a pan-African globalist revolutionary, to being a reactionary capitalist, a puppet for white imperialists. That's something else we really, really need to examine. Because just like you have people saying they could, there's a lot of righteous youth, there's a lot of revolutionary youth, there's a lot of politicized youth who grow up to be dejected adults, who grow up, abandon the struggle, and just go for materialism. So just like the wayward youth has potential to be a Malcolm, we got a lot of young politicized youth that have the potential to be Clarence Thomases. So in our effort to pretend like we give a damn about wayward youth, we even neglect the revolutionary youth. We tell them to calm down. We tell them how you gonna get a job with all that. You better watch what you say. You better watch what you post on social media. You're not going to get into a good school. You're not going to get a job. Instead of saying be as revolutionary as you want to be, we will give you the support, the financing, the shelter, and everything you need to fight for your people. We will give you the equipment and the inspiration. If you want to be a frontline soldier on behalf of black folks, the black community got you. We can't say that because we don't do that. But y'all worried about pretending like every young black drug dealer, every young black pimp, every black gangster rapper, every black man on Twitter talking about black women are gorillas and apes. Y'all want to pretend that those black people are just Malcolms in waiting. That's such nonsense, and I'm sick of it now. There's enough of that. It's disrespectful to Malcolm. Just like when feminists say Harriet Tubman would have been a feminist. Harriet Tubman would have stood on stage with Gloria Steinem holding their hands in the air. Don't lie on our ancestors. They've been through enough already. At the least we can do for them, if you want to honor your ancestors, is to understand and be honest about it. I can understand, being incorrect, but I mean, some of y'all ain't just being incorrect. Y'all deliberately try to destroy the reality. So, if you want revolutionary offspring, you need revolutionary parents. You need revolutionary infrastructure. You need revolutionary ideology. You need to reward revolutionary behavior and sanction reactionary behavior. You need revolutionary culture. And we don't need the masses of black people to do this. 3 people in the community, 2 people in the community are enough to lay the foundation and begin advocacy for revolution. And you build from there. If 2 people each recruit 1 other person, that's 4 people. And then if those 2 people, and we just cultivate this, we develop this, we nurture this, and stop talking nonsense. And let me tell you something. We need to also tell our young people, don't think you got time. This is a world that is hostile to your very existence. This is a nation that has a history of stifling, killing, and disrupting your development. So don't think, hey, like the white boys, I could just ball out or wild out in my 20s, and then in my 30s, I'll get it together. Nah, your people are under crisis. Your people are under deliberate genocidal oppression. So therefore, you can enjoy yourself. You can pursue your hobbies and interests, but you know that you have an obligation upon you were born a black man or a black woman in the United States. You are a black male, black female anywhere in the world. But if you choose to say, hey, I'm going to play with this system, I'm going to go for money, hoes, and clothes, all a nigga knows. If you want to live that life, then that will be your legacy. I don't care if you die at 16, 17, 18. That is who you are and what you have done. And I'm not saying you can't be young, but you better be a young revolutionary. We got examples. I ain't saying you can't have fun, but you better be a young revolutionary having fun. But if you're not, it is again, this is your option to choose. But let's not distort history. Let's not do these mental gymnastics to turn degenerates into heroes just because they died in their 20s. When we know that there's no natural progression from degenerate to righteousness because we got 50, 60, 70, and 80-year-old scumbags running around here right now. What happened? Why didn't they hit their Malcolm X transformation? What we see, for the most part, is young scumbags aging to old scumbags. And it's very rare. So if you want to make a call, if you want to make a prediction about what coulda, shoulda, woulda been, you're more likely to be accurate. If you're saying he would have been the same type of man as he was a young man, he would have been the same middle-aged man. And I'm pretty much the same dude I always was. I do have a level of refinement. I've calmed down a little bit. I have made some adjustments. But my ultimate goal, my ultimate trajectory has not changed since I was 12, 14 years old. And there is ages where we can provide leeway, where we can say, hey, you know, they're young, they're going to make mistakes. But there's a big difference between youthful mistakes and youthful indiscretions and race treason. I have to remind y'all of that. And yes, a 20-year-old in the United States can be arrested and tried and convicted of treason. So can an 18-year-old. You know, but if some young 20-year-old was caught selling secrets to the Russians and got caught, y'all would be like, oh, well, he shouldn't have been selling them secrets. Y'all wouldn't be like, oh, he could have been a Malcolm X. But then you can portray the black race, and the black race is so forgiving because we don't respect ourselves. We don't have racial esteem. We don't understand that our standing status and that we are a nation. We have no commitment to our people, so we're very sympathetic to others who have lacked commitment to our people. But if you are truly committed to our people, then you're less sympathetic to those who aren't. And you're more sympathetic to those who are. It's human. Why? Tell them that it's human nature. Let's have a little music. And before I go, we'll be back here Friday at what time? We'll be back Friday at 7 a.m. Central Time. iTunes Radio, TuneIn app, AM 1680, Q4 Radio, Q4 website, q4.org. You will find this show archived at diallokenyatta.com. If you can, are so willing, please make a contribution to help us stay on the air. Also, Friday, I have to check my schedule. I'm heading to Kansas City. I'll be in Kansas City next weekend. Not this weekend, but weekend after next. I'm going to go to the World War I, National World War I Museum. If you're in Kansas City or in the surrounding areas, you need to go to that World War I. It's very informative, very interesting. World War I it was the first modern industrial war. I've always been very fascinated and very interested in World War I. So I will be at the museum. All my Kansas City people, holla at me. I'll be there. You know I'm going to be at Blue Nile Ethiopian Cafe, because it is owned by a black man who supports the community, who supports Pan-Africanism. When you go to eat at Blue Nile, downtown Kansas City, River Market area, the money that you give him is going to help struggling farmers and agriculturalists in Africa, mainly Ethiopia, and the community at large. And he's an Ethiopian Orthodox. So people try to pretend like I don't work with people who have religious convictions, when I do have allies and comrades who do have the delusion of religion. And I talked to him about his Ethiopian Orthodox when he want to talk about it. He talks to me about my atheism when he want to talk about it. But anyway, looking forward to being in Kansas City. So it might be a rerun or rebroadcast Friday. I don't know yet. I'll let y'all know Friday about what's going to happen next Friday. Bro Diallo Show, Q4 Radio.
Must be built. Because in the minds of the majority of our people today, Africa is too far away. So the only way you and I can point them in that direction is build new bridges. We have to have the type of understanding of Africa and the type of understanding of our people here in order to build a bridge, a contact, a line of communication between the two. And once the lines of communication have been established, and our African brothers can
Thanks for listening. Tune in. Please share the show. I'm on I'm on YouTube now instead of Facebook. So please get the word out. Let people know about the transition if you're so inclined. I appreciate y'all listening, and I'll see y'all Friday morning. Peace.